Must be fun for the the blue and the red out there for them to keep busy with.
And the purple.
And the purple. I'm already thinking it's 33 days before daylight savings time. So I'm getting past all this.
It's, you know what, Mark? It's staying lighter longer.
Yeah, but it's staying whiter longer too.
That's a good point.
Good
Favorite
one.
day of the year, winter solstice.
No, I'm a Halloween person, so it's for me it's fall all around. I'm on here for the business end of things now. I want to hear how the everybody's working out for this town, and hoping we can get economically dreams going.
Well, hoping we can find some economic dreams too.
Yeah. I'll mute myself so you can just get yourself going.
Hey, sorry I'm late, guys.
Hey, Scott.
How you doing?
Hanging in there.
This thing called work gets in the way. So let's see, who do we have here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 of us. Is that right? I think so. So we have our quorum, so I'd say we get going. What do you think, John? Can't hear you, bud.
Sorry about that. I sent you an email. I got a work thing at 7. So is quorum 4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
Sorry, short notice. I just found out.
That's okay.
Thank you.
And Scott, we'll have to just a reminder to queue up for WACA before you officially open.
Well, I don't know what that means, but but apparently we're not live, guys. So
okay.
Oh,
Never
so
mind then.
actually we are live. I have like this weird setup because I'm doing it from home, but I just checked. We are live on YouTube, and I will share that. We're just not live on the channel because there's no way we could get to the station.
Gotcha.
But you guys are ready to go whenever you're ready to go.
Yep. Sounds good. Thanks, Allison. So yeah, as you heard, I think they're going to be playing it back on the television tomorrow, I think is what I saw in the email. But apparently we're live on Facebook and YouTube. So say hello to the folks at home, everyone. I saw John wore his best sweatshirt.
You've been asked all the time.
That's right. So, all right, we got a lot to get through today. So we'll call it to order the session of the Finance Committee, 5:04 p.m. And item number 2 on the agenda is any public comment. I see a few members from the public here. If there's anyone who'd like to say a few words, I think everyone has the ability to unmute themselves. Is that right, Michael? Or Jen? Yep. Good, Mark.
Okay. I suppose I should make myself known. Mark Casone, 849 Hawthorne Road. Loving the winter and everything's going on. I just want to say to the board, it's always good to be on a different board to listen to. Finances is a great way to start a whole new way of doing things for the town. And I'm hoping that from the board I can hear some good news about the next the financial future. And for the red and blue, I know that's the budgets. I'd like to hear good things, hopefully, from them, and everything that goes well with this board hopefully goes well for the town. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Mark. And yeah, I hope everything goes well as well. I mean, today we're here starting off our fiscal year 22 budget discussions, and the committee has invited Michael as town manager, Jen, assistant town manager, and some of the other department heads to kind of give us an overall picture of, I guess, where we're headed for the budget. And Brittany, I know you maybe give us a kind of an overview of kind of where we are in the preparation. I know these are some of our preliminary hearings to see kind of where they're heading, what the numbers are looking like for the different departments, and how they fit into the overall budget. So for the folks at home, the Finance Committee started meeting, we'll say, on television a few years ago by request of certain community members. And we thank you for that request, and we thank you for feedback, because I think it's good for the finance committee, who usually has no visitors to be seen and be heard, particularly when it comes to discussing the budget of some of our larger departments. So welcome, everyone. So I guess with that, I don't know, Michael, if you're starting, or Brittany, talk about the overall budget picture and kind of where we're headed.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I'll actually start it off and really just provide a context for everyone on the finance committee and everybody, all the guests and everybody watching at home, just kind of how this, the context within which this budget is developing. So I do have a few slides, but I've tried to keep them under 10. So, including this one. So again, we're starting with the FY22 budget. That's the fiscal year starting July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022. This is going to be another challenging year. I don't think that is a surprise for any of us out there, just given what we've been seeing in the news and what we know about the pandemic. I've really tried to hone in on just a few key areas that are, important factors for this budget moving forward. First, obviously, we really have no idea the full economic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. There, are all kinds of theories about what an economic recovery could look like, but nobody knows. This year, we essentially have level funded state aid numbers. Now, that's from the governor, and that's the kickoff to the rest of the legislative budget process. Number 3 is, again, we're seeing the effects of our limited growth strategy. We do have a couple of new developments that are potentially coming online, but it's hard to know exactly when they would come online if they were approved. Number 4, we've seen some large increases in Keefe Tech and our retirement assessments, and then also health insurance as well, which is providing some pressure. And then finally, we're looking at reducing our reliance on the stabilization fund from the previous year, and I'll get to each of these points in a little more detail. First of all, with the economic recovery, I think the last time we talked about this, which was the revised FY21 budget, we talked about all these different shapes and the hockey stick or the Nike swoosh shape. I think it's still too early to tell exactly what that economic recovery is going to look like. I think the one thing that everybody can agree on is that it is predicated on getting people vaccinated and getting people out into the workforce and basically opening up again. And I think even with that happening, we're going to see some major changes in the business world. And I think that is going to have an impact on economics moving forward. That being said, state revenues came in a lot higher this past quarter than what they did this time the previous year, which was quite a surprise for everybody. So maybe that will be a foreshadowing of what's to come for the rest of FY21 and into FY22, but it's really tough to know right now. Second thing is I talked about state aid essentially being level funded. If you see at the bottom right here, our total state aid numbers are going up $13,000, which is barely over 0.1%. We do have a slight increase in our Chapter 70 numbers and a slight increase in our unrestricted local government aid, but that's been offset by some other cherry sheet or other state aid revenues that we see in the year. And again, we were pretty fortunate this past year in that, or actually in FY21, I should say, we had budgeted for a pretty significant decrease, I should say, in state aid. And actually what happened is that the legislature ended up level funding it. So we were very, very grateful for that. We're seeing a slight increase this year. So when you have expenses that are increasing this much and revenue only increasing this much, there are some fiscal pressures that you have to identify and work with. I talked about new growth before. So this was planned. This is not a surprise to any of us. Some of the property purchases that we have made in recent years, they have limited the growth in Ashland, residential growth primarily. That is a value that we have as a community espoused. And you've really seen that through the town meeting votes and even in some debt exclusion votes. So this year we have budgeted our new growth at $450,000. If you remember, just like a few years ago, actually probably 3 years ago, we had new growth numbers of around $1 million. So it was pretty significant. It would help us do a lot of things, help us absorb a lot of fixed cost increases, and also allowed us to do some important things within our departmental budgets. We do have some new developments that have the potential to bring in significant new growth revenue. So we have one, the Arbella at Ashland, which is just going to start the ZBA process. That's a 40B project over at the Rail Transit District. That is 180 units of age-restricted housing with 25% designated affordable, which allows all of the units to be counted towards our subsidized housing inventory. But it will provide some significant new growth revenue as well. There's also the Ashland Mills project that is being proposed at 10 to 50 Main Street. That is in the very preliminary stages. A development agreement is being worked out with the select board. That would actually require a zoning change at town meeting. So it's going to be really hard to count anything for Ashland Mills for a while because we don't even know if it would be approved. I talked a little bit about some of the assessments that have increased significantly this year, or what we're projecting to increase significantly. First is the Keefe Tech budget. So we've seen an increase in students going to Keefe Tech, so naturally our assessment goes up. It's going up, what we're anticipating, about $326,000. Our non-excluded debt service is going up $252,000. Again, that is to pay for some previously authorized projects and then leaving a little room in our capital plan moving forward. And our benefits and insurance is going up $836,000. So you can see with all of the total appropriated expenses there, it's going up $2.2 million. And the three items I've highlighted here take up more than half of it. I'm also talking about reducing our reliance on the stabilization fund so this is a little tricky. What we had planned last year was to draw off $1.4 million in each of the 3 years. I know we had talked at the last hearing about reducing that gradually, but I'm budgeting for $900,000 this year for a couple of different reasons. First of all, we have level state aid. And our financial policies say that we only withdraw from the stabilization fund when we have a reduction of state aid, I believe 10% or more. Obviously, we didn't even have a reduction last year, but we still had a budget gap that we needed to fix. So the policies are written so that they can be flexible and malleable with the situation. But we still need to take money out of it this year because we're trying to land this plane softly. And so what I'm looking at doing is budgeting $900,000 in the stabilization fund, or withdrawn from the stabilization fund this year, and then $450,000 the next year, and then zero the following year. So this slowly weans us off of reliance on the stabilization fund for our operating budget. Otherwise, if we kept it at 1.4 million at each of the 3 years, we have this like fiscal cliff. We'll have a $1.4 million gap we have to make up in 1 year. And that's going to be virtually impossible. So just a couple of caveats here. I've not talked about this with the school department. And I believe Brittany's had some conversations with Chris, and I haven't had a conversation yet with Jim about it, but this is what I am proposing right now. But in all of this bad news, I do want to say that there is some good news. This is a graphic from last year's presentation. When we were looking at the forecast, we were looking at expenses, I should say, of $66,578,266 in FY22. That was because of what we had anticipated in a significant drop in revenue and matching our expenditures to that. The good news is that our current budget, which is balanced the way it is for FY22, is actually $68 million. So it's $1.5 million more. That means that we're doing a little bit better on the revenue side than what we had anticipated. And finally, this is very, very preliminary. I can't reinforce that enough. There are a number of things that can change throughout the course of this. First of all, state aid numbers can change as it makes its way through the House and the Senate and ultimately conference committee. And hopefully, the governor would sign it without too much fanfare. And we can get a budget done, or a state budget would be done on July 1st. So we would have a much better idea of what we're working with. We could get a little bit more fidelity on new growth numbers and new approvals. The GIC numbers that we are budgeting for can come in better than what we're expecting. They could also come in worse than what we're expecting. So that could change. And then the same thing for Keefe Tech as well. Right now it's an estimate. It may be higher or it may be lower. We usually don't know that until probably around the April timeframe. Maybe we'll know sooner than that, but that is my overview. If anybody has any questions on that, I'll try to answer them.
Scott, I have a few questions. I'm happy to follow your lead, though.
Oh yeah, speak up.
Okay, thanks, Michael, for the overview. I appreciate it. I think you answered my first question in your last slide, which was a state aid number, which is an estimate or a target. So I won't push that because there's just sounds like there's going to be uncertainty about what that number will ultimately be. Stabilization fund, I guess, is the main topic I would like to chat a little bit more about. I'm happy to see the recommendation of $900,000, that being lower than when we had this conversation last year, because I think you had projected or would have proposed to see 1.4 in each of these 2 years. And I think you received some feedback from this committee suggesting that a percentage-based approach to withdrawal from the stabilization fund might be better. So at any rate, how you arrived at the 900,000 is one question. But before I get to that, in a prior meeting, we had discussed some revenue, some COVID-based revenue coming in from the state or federal government that the town of Ashland received that I thought largely offset the $1.4 million withdrawal from stabilization fund. And maybe I'm not maybe not remembering that correctly, but I think we had some fiscal maneuvering to do with having withdrawn from the stabilization fund the $1.4 million and then accounting for the income related to COVID aid. So that's one question. And the second question is, with future stimulus packages, how would we plan proactively to account for any potential future state or federal aid that comes in from the COVID pandemic related expenses or funding?
Okay. Brittany, I think, has a plan on going into more detail on the COVID stuff, but in general, Ryan, it's a good question. The state aid or federal aid that we received helped support the operating budget and the expanded expenses related to COVID and the pandemic. And so what that did is that provided a little relief on the expenditure end. And so what happened is that relief transformed into free cash when it was certified. So, we had budgeted, let's just say for an example, and using very round numbers, you budget $100,000 in health and $50,000. You have increased expenses of $10,000 related to COVID. So you're now at 110, but you've received CARES Act money in the amount of $50,000 to offset that. So you've got 60,000 left over at the end of the year. So that is how that factored into the budget and stuff. And your recollection about free cash and the changes into the stabilization fund, or the deposits in the stabilization fund, are, you're right. We did do some things. It wasn't necessarily related to COVID directly, but we put in, I believe it was $1 million out of free cash, which is just straight in line with our free cash policy. And when we received the news that our Chapter 70 numbers, our state aid numbers, were going to be level funded, what we ended up doing is splitting that as new revenue. And then we also had received more new growth than what we had anticipated. And we took that new growth number and deposited it into the stabilization fund as well, just to make it whole.
Yeah, I think that's my recollection too, Michael, that although we did draw 1.4 million, we put in 1.4 million roughly from, we'll say, FY20 free cash and other savings. So net kind of zero, if you want to kind of lump them together as far as reduction in fiscal 21.
Okay, thanks. And so that's just important information to share. If the slide reflects it, looks like we would be withdrawing stabilization funds of close to $3 million over 3 years. And in fact, we're maybe not. We might be more neutral than that looks in that slide.
Yeah, no, I agree. Sorry, Michael. When I saw that 1.4 million, I think the important piece missing was that we also kind of put that back. You know what I mean? So we're whole compared to our discussions a year ago, right? When we were going through the budget and determining what might be prudent as far as withdrawing from the stabilization fund.
Yeah, I believe last year I'd included a balance, like a running balance. I should include that in future presentations.
Just a question, Mike, on the stabilization fund withdrawals, seeing that there's some subsequent fiscal year withdrawals. After many years of not withdrawing, again, we took money out, we put it back. We did that preemptively because of COVID and the uncertainty at the time, which obviously made sense. What's changed, though, that we are projecting additionally needed distributions from the stabilization over the next several years? Is there any one thing we could point to?
Well, I think even though state aid is level funded, we have been dependent on state aid increasing significantly to support increases in expenditures. Let's be honest about it. New growth numbers have come in, usually higher than that 450 that we're projecting. So we do have some revenue. We don't have revenue reductions compared to the previous year. What we do have is, I think, less revenue growth than what we are used to. I think that's probably the best way to say it. And so that's why I'm saying we need to, some expenditures have been buttressed by that $1.4 million. And then we added the spending from the level funding of state aid. And so, to keep us from having to make draconian cuts, we're going to have to take something out. But like everybody here agrees, we need to start reducing our reliance on it, or else we are going to have that $1.4 million fiscal cliff.
So just to follow up to that, should we revisit policy in terms of what the stabilization fund is, how much we're adding to that annually, or should that, given that it sounds like growth is moderating, should that also turn our attention to how we're treating this rainy day fund?
I was thinking about that earlier, John, just because I think we're going to get some pushback, maybe from some departments in terms of reducing the reliance on the stabilization fund. And knowing that we usually have higher free cash in the fall, I was thinking about how that could be how we could maybe look at things. I'm going to suggest actually that we don't look at the financial policies this year because I feel like we're going to be taking a 1-year approach.
Mhm.
We're going to be trying to solve a 1-year problem and applying it to a 5-year policy. That's my suggestion for right now. So, no. Not that we do need to look at them, but I'm not necessarily sure this is the right time.
No, it's fair. I think, sorry.
Well, you just muted yourself.
Okay, I think I got it. I think that's a good point. Again, not that something we need to address now, but I think as a committee, there's something we need to keep front of mind here, because if this ends up being a longer trend, I'd be much happier if we're as proactive as possible. That's the only thing I want to say. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Michael from the committee? Okay, hearing none. Thanks, Michael, for that high-level update. Sorry for the top of my head here. Doing all these meetings these days, I'm trying to stand when I do these meetings because otherwise I'm sitting all day. But anyway, so moving along on the budget presentations, we have the 3 departments listed there: the police department, fire department, public works. I don't think we have to take them in any particular order. I don't know, Michael, if there's one pressing business.
I believe Brittany had a presentation.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Brittany, did you want to do that before or after the departments?
I can go after. I actually have Vin's presentation up on the screen right now that I can share for him.
Okay, so we'll start with
So Vin, you're going next.
Chief Alfano. Perfect.
Okay, thank you. I see a sigh of release in Doug's face. Well, thank you to all of you for hearing us tonight. I know you all have a difficult job, and we've worked very hard on preparing this budget. We've worked very closely with Brittany. She's been a great resource for us. As we go through the budget tonight, a lot of what we're going to speak about was based on our actuals. We're very actual based, and that helps us guide and also rethink our procedures. As we go through the slides, the next slide, Brittany, please. I wanted to just give you a thumbprint of what your police department has been doing the past year, 2020. If you will recall, and I don't know how any of us could forget, 2020 was sort of like the year that wasn't with the COVID virus. We had a total number of calls for service. Those are calls of all kinds, of 9,707 calls. That is slightly down from the previous year, and we relate a lot of that to the cessation of a lot of activity. A lot of businesses were closed, schools were closed, people were not on the roads as much, which is reflected by our citation figure. We wrote 603 citations last year. We normally write a little higher than that. Again, there was just not the traffic volume out there of cars for officers to stop. So I suppose that's a good thing, because our accident rate went down significantly because of that, which is not shown on here. We still had a good number of arrests. We arrested 119 people last year for various crimes. We did see during the COVID, unfortunately, a trend towards more serious crimes and more violent crimes towards the end of last year. And unfortunately, that trend is continuing into the beginning of this year. But we will certainly deal with that. That's our job. Next slide, Brittany. These are just some photographs I wanted to include again to show you some of the resources that you pay for, the taxpayers and town government supports. Our motorcycle unit is very, very active. You see them out there all the time. This past year, pre-COVID, we did quite a few special events. The motorcycles are very involved in that. They use a lot less gas from a budgetary standpoint than a cruiser, so we like to have them out as much as possible. It saves money on fuel, and they're very, very visible. You'll see a photograph of our very active mountain bike unit. That keeps the officers in shape. And it also, again, zero cost. We don't burn any fuel when the bikes are out there. With the increase in the number of town forests and the trails, the Riverwalk trails, we've deployed the bike units to those areas. and it's really helped significantly. Our K9 unit speaks for itself. Our new dog Ajax has really done an amazing job in finding lost people, in finding criminals. So again, thank you for supporting our officers in this K9 unit. Next slide, Brittany, please. Okay, jumping right into the budget numbers. I want to caveat when we get into the personnel issues and the salaries, we are currently running 4 positions short from the previous year. And those are due to retirements. We had Lieutenant Dave Bolden retired from 30 plus years in the department. Officer Bill Foster retired this past year, again, 30 plus years in the department. Officer Katrina Anderson accepted a position with a federal law enforcement agency. So she left, so her position is open. And these figures, actually the increase in these figures shows we have an officer out administratively that has been out for several years. Last year, we did not carry him in our listing. So we do have him listed in the upcoming year. So that's why you see, as we get into it, an increase in officer salaries. That's a position that existed last year, but this year we are actually carrying it because we really need to fill that position. All of these positions are critical to be backfilled. They're costing us money in overtime, which is reflected in this budget. And they're also costing us in work. There are things that we need to do and we want to do that we have not been able to do because of our staffing shortages. It also causes a lot more wear and tear in our workforce. As you know, we're a civil service department, so we must work within the civil service system to fill all of these positions. But it's critical that we fill these positions. What I'll do, I'll go through the personnel aspects first and then get into the actual expenses in the line items on the expenses. Many of our expense line items we've level funded from last year. So you see 0 increases in those. I'm very happy to talk about any of those areas if anyone has any questions, but where there's no increases, if you don't need me to, I won't spend a lot of time on those. Okay, on the officer's salaries, those salaries also include the administrative salaries, the clerical salaries, that's our records clerk, our executive assistant, our crossing guards, our school crossing guards, their salaries come out of our budget. And that covers the animal control officers as well. We realigned and reevaluated the salary levels of our animal control department. We have one full-time animal control officer who does an amazing job, but for a while she's been a force of one because we had a part-time animal control officer that took a job elsewhere. So we've recently filled that position with an extremely, extremely qualified assistant animal control officer. It's a part-time position. In order to attract qualified candidates, we had to offer a higher salary for that position. So some of that the requested difference that you see on the salaries takes that into consideration. And we restructured that, and we feel we have a very, very effective animal control program. Also, a number of our officers, because from a positive standpoint, as far as officer retention, officers stay here. Ashland is not a revolving door like many police departments where officers come in, they stay a while, and then they go out and they take a job someplace else for whatever reason, whether working conditions or financial. Our police officer staff and our administrative staff, they're graciously aging in place. They're becoming veterans very quickly. They're staying. So factored into that salary increase are also a number of step increases, which are contractual step increases that officers would get the longer that they stay. Moving on down to overtime to cover vacation and sick time and regular police overtime. That is an area where we work very closely with Brittany on. And we re-leveled and reevaluated those figures based on our actuals. Naturally, this past year with the COVID, we had a lot of overtime because we had to cover positions for officers that were out on quarantine or officers that were out sick. We also had quite a few significant cases, criminal cases, where we needed to use additional staff, detective overtime for the patrol force to help investigate and prevent and combat a lot of these crimes. We actually did have a mini crime wave actually coming over from Framingham that caused us a lot of extra work and a lot of concerns. So overtime is reflected in that. Also, when the COVID breaks, again, we're very, very active in special events in town. So a lot of the overtime that we're looking at once the COVID breaks would be used towards actually having officers out there on extra traffic patrols, radar patrols, traffic enforcement, and assisting with special events. You remember we had some the parades, very, very successful events, the high school parade, the Christmas parade. So we need to have the officers out there for safety and for coverage, because those are type of events that townspeople have called us and they want to see those events continue, especially in our partnership with the fire department. Moving down, we level funded our court overtime. The longevity and fringe actually went down. I have some good news. It went down by $3,500. That was based on the retirement of two very senior officers. So by them retiring, we saved some money on the longevity and the fringe benefits. The next three categories, shift differential, holiday pay, and officer in charge pay, are all level funded. Under other incentives, we have a $4,900 increase. We had officers that achieved some advanced degrees, and so contractually we need to pay them those increases. And we saved some money on our Quinn bill, which is a state education bill that some of the officers participate in. That actually went down $409. And again, the reason why that went down was because of the retirements that we had for officers. Into the overtime for in-service and training, we're going to do the best we can with what we have on that. That will be level funded. And I do want to put in a quick caveat in and we thank you for the support for the new building. A number of these categories, because we're bringing that new building online in about 12 to 14 months, will be significantly decreased. And that's one area where we will see a significant decrease. The cost of overtime for training our officers, because we'll have a training room within the facility. We'll get quite a few free training classes because we have that training room. And we'll also see a decrease of well over $33,000 on the rent that we're paying for the building that I'm sitting in right now, 91 Main Street, our administrative building. So again, the new building is costing money, but there are some significant areas of savings that will be yearly. 2 years from now, we won't be asking you for $33,000 for the rent on Main Street because we won't have it. Our computer maintenance account, as you can see, there's a $13,600 increase in that. The reason for that is over $10,000 of that was an increase in our IMC dispatch and 911 software. They had an increase in the price of that. We have to pay that. We're very heavily dependent on that system. That system manages all of our dispatch and record services. It also manages the displacement of 911 calls when they come into the building. 3,600 of that is we intend to purchase a new detailed tracking, scheduling, and monitoring system. There's some great new software out there that will enable us to have very good tracking and scheduling on our details, the private details that are out there for officers. As you know, driving around town in the good weather, you're always running into construction because of all the various projects in town. There are a number of significant projects coming online. We really need that software system, that $3,600 system, to help manage that and to schedule that. Quite a few of the next categories are all level funded. Contract service, radio equipment, photo supplies, postage, office supplies, auto parts. We will manage with what we have on those. On our firearms supplies budget, you'll notice there's an $1,806 increase. That increase is for practice ammunition for the range. With new staff coming on board, we'll need to ensure that they qualify through the state mandated qualifications. The next categories: reference books, animal food, prisoner meals, and other charges, miscellaneous supplies, are all level funded. Other charges, we're asking for a $1,200 increase. That increase is an increase in rent for this coming year for the 33,000 on the 91 Main Street. And again, that increase will go away in another year when we lose this building. So we have to pay that rent increase because we need this facility due to our overcrowding for at least one more year. We level funded in-state travel. Our dues and membership went up $1,000, and there's actually two reasons for that. We are a partner in MetroLEC, which is an area law enforcement consortium. We've used MetroLEC quite a bit. Perhaps you've seen it on the news this year when we've been out searching for missing persons, for high-risk entry warrants. We're a member of MetroLEC, and the dues actually went up to that. That's a service that we've used since I've been in this department probably 20 times, and each time has been a critical incident. Also, now that we have the new building coming online in another year, we can resume our police department accreditation program. That was on hold because we could never be accredited in the current facility. So we need to start gearing that back up again, because as soon as we get into that new facility, we're going to be pursuing accreditation finalization like a tiger, and that has great benefits to the town. It'll help reduce insurance rates. It adds to a lot of factors. So that's going to be some money well spent. We level funded training and conference courses. And lastly, our miscellaneous, the $3,000. What we did this year, as you all know, we have a very, very active auxiliary police department. They're all volunteers. They don't get paid a nickel. They help us at every single event that we have out there, farmers markets. They help us during severe weather events. When we had the last blizzard, they were in blocking roads with falling trees and power lines. Everything they do is paid for by themselves. So they never really had a mechanism for the police department, us, the regular police department, if they needed a flashlight, if they needed a particular piece of first aid equipment. They had no mechanism to get that. They had to dip into their own pockets. So this year we created a line item with Brittany, and we put $3,000. We funded it with $3,000 for next year for our auxiliary officers, so that if they need a piece of equipment, the police department can pay for that, and they don't have to dip into their own pockets. So we don't know how much we'll end up spending out of that, but we wanted to fund that. And that's sort of our budget in a nutshell. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer or clarify anything for you?
Jack, looks like you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for the chief.
Sure.
Are those actual numbers in 2019 budget, in 2020 budget, and 21 budget, and then I'm sorry, in 19 and 20, and then are those the actual numbers? Is that what was requested?
That's what we requested.
It'd be more helpful if we had the actual numbers. For those budgets.
Sorry, I misspoke. Those are actual. I'm sorry.
They are actual. All right.
Yep.
I believe that.
Yes, they are.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you go back to the slide before, Brittany?
I guess maybe just kind of one overall observation, being the accountant, I kind of did the math. We're looking at a 7.5% increase year over year on this budget, and which I'm not fundamentally opposed to, because I think you guys do wonderful work, and certainly an asset to the town. And maybe this is more a question of Michael and Brittany, kind of how that fits into the overall picture of the budget this year.
I can tell you it's pretty tough. I think when you get to Brittany's presentation, you'll see what we have to work with in terms of a budget. But the chief made a very, very good point that once the building is online, we will see reduced expenses throughout some of this budget, and we can then redeploy that within the budget in other places that's needed to help accomplish what we need.
Yeah, and maybe just to make a point for anyone potentially listening at home, but any borrowing costs or anything like that will eventually show up related to the construction and ownership of that public safety building is not reflected in the police budget or the fire budget. That is something that is in the debt service budget, which is separate. So, those future, increases will be, are not reflected here and will never be reflected here.
And Scott, one point that I just would like to add, the FBI every year, they're sort of the statistical controller of all police operations in the country. They run all the information resources. They have a formula that they use for police departments. And the formula is very helpful because what it does is they take into consideration your demographics, your population, your crime statistics, and they give you a number of what they recommend is the minimum number of police officers you should have for your community. For Ashland, at the population that we're at right now, the FBI recommends we have 30 sworn police officers, and that does not include the chief. That's 30 sworn police officers. Our current staffing, minus the 4 vacancies, so we have 28 sworn police officers, and of that 28, we're running 4 short. So right now we're falling far below the FBI national standard for recommended law enforcement services. So the goal, the ultimate goal of our department is to reach that magic 30 number eventually. We still have a little ways to go, but with the vacancies that we have, we're far below that.
Chief, I have a follow-on to that question, and thanks for bringing that up because I do tend to ask that question every year. So thanks for hitting it ahead. This budget for officer salaries does include those 4 positions, though. So should they be filled, we are adequately funding salary for those 4 positions.
Yes, you are.
Okay, and the opposite is also true in the unfortunate situation that those positions take 6 months or 8 months to fill. We'll have a salary advantage, or we'll have some funds in that line item at the end of the year. That might not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, you will. However, we need to fill those slots, and right now we're filling them with overtime. So there could be some.
So the offset is there. Okay.
It's an offset.
Okay, thanks. My other question, I have now forgotten. I apologize. It'll come back to me in a minute.
Okay. In the meantime, anyone else have any questions from the committee?
Oh,
yeah, I did have a question, Scott.
Go ahead, Ashwini.
So it seems like there is going to be possibly a saving of only probably $60,000 then once the public facility, the public building is up and running. Is that right? Because I heard 30 in training and 30 for the rental of Main Street.
Yeah, the rental is 33 plus utilities. The town pays utilities for here too. So we'll be saving well over $33,000 in rent and utilities for this building. And also a lot of the training that we're doing now on overtime, we can do on regular time because the officers will already be in the building and we have a place to do it.
Okay, so we have 2 of those line items.
Yes, those 2 line items will be definitely saved.
That's
And again, the new building will have a revenue stream. By having that training room is golden square footage because we can let private companies or other police departments use that training facility. And in the law enforcement world, regarding police training, if you host a training class from an outside company, they always give you so many free seats for your staff because you're letting them hold the class in your building. So believe me, I'm very good at taking advantage of that. So a lot of our staff will be trained for free. And your average police training class generally runs between $150 to $350 for an 8-hour class. So if you start multiplying that by 3, 4, 5 seats a class that we host, that adds up. Also, our firing range is, again, another gold mine because we can have other police departments rent our range or use our range and receive some of the money back for the operating costs for that. So that new building really does have a good stream of revenue for the department.
All right. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Ryan, did it come back to you?
was related to Ashwini's question as well. Chief, do you anticipate, or how much time do you anticipate you or your staff needing to support the building of the public safety building? And is that accounted for sort of in the shift work or overtime salary? I would imagine you've provided a lot of input already. Some additional time is likely to be required during the construction process. Just your thoughts on whether that can be accommodated in your current staffing scenario. Or
Well, actually, it's a great question because a lot of that actually already took place. Needless to say, I've lived and breathed the building. I've seen Mike in the building committee more than my wife the past year. We've spent very long nights together. A lot of our staff has already been involved in the design and actually putting together the facility, and that was all done on their regular time, on regular shifts. There may be some overtime, and actually I don't get overtime, but there may be some overtime involved if we need to have specialist officers come in to work with the contractors, but I don't anticipate much at all. We have a very capable project manager and a very capable project management company, and their job really is to be the clerk of the works and run that project. The chief and the command staff are very heavily involved in that, but most of that is done during normal tours of duty and normal work hours.
Okay, great, thank you.
All right, other questions from the committee? Okay, well, Chief, we thank you for joining us today. You're welcome to stay on and listen to Chief Roby and Doug if you like, but
I'm going to give them more support, sure.
You're probably good to go. So it looks like Brittany's pulling up the fire budget right now. So I guess Chief Roby, it's all you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having us here. Brittany, we can go to the next slide. So first off, like Chief Alfano said, it's been a different year for us. We've had to change the way we do a lot of things. But as you see, we still do have fires, still do have medicals. We just changed the way we did it. That third picture there with the ladder truck, you'll see Chief Alfano and myself. That was actually what increased last year was a lot more community engagement. That's a graduation parade we did, but last year we were involved in a lot of birthday parades, the Santa ride. So actually one positive thing I think came out of last year with all that, the community engagement part of it. Lastly, on the right there is firefighter Peter Stone. For those who don't know, he's been a member here and he'll be retiring here in April after 35 years to the town of Ashland, but about 50 years in the fire service totally. So we'll be missing him after April. He's not looking forward to it, but so where we are today, our current staffing, we have myself, the chief. I work, days. I have a captain in fire prevention and operations, works Monday through Friday. We have 4 shifts rotating. Each shift has a duty officer at lieutenant, and we have 5 firefighters and 1 dispatcher. And if you don't recall, the 5th firefighter that we currently have right now is still partially funded under the FEMA SAFER grant. This year it's 75-25. As we get into the FY22 year in March, it'll switch to a 35% coverage and 65% covered by the town. Blacking out of there for me probably is my biggest impact and something we've asked for a few years, but it is not in my budget this year because we were looking at a level funded budget. But I think it is probably the highest priority for us is a deputy/training officer. To bring some administration in here and to bring a full-time training officer into the department. I think that's probably our biggest hit right now. We can go to the next slide. So the calls, with COVID, we actually had a little reduction in calls for the year. You'll see the fire calls at 2389 and 19, and 2020, 2273. Structure fires were 37 and 31 in those 2 years. Medical calls, as you'll see in 2020, we had 1,242, but our transports actually went down. A lot of that is because of COVID. During the COVID crisis, when it was really heavy, not that we're still not under it, we were actually dealing with patients and treating them in the ambulance and talking them not into going into the hospital and doing remote conversations with the doctor. They didn't want people coming running to the hospital when they were sick to try to prevent the spread. So that's why the reduction there. Most ambulances service across the state saw a 25 to 30% drop. Again, those are just some pictures showing the calls did happen. Those are all from last year. A motor vehicle accident, a house fire in Ashland, the rescue at the quarries. One was an explosion on Main Street, underground explosion, and then the last one is a house fire we did mutual aid with Hopkinen. We can go to the next slide. So looking at our personal services in the budget, our biggest increase is under the permanent positions, 51130. That is, majority of that is because of the change of the percentage come March of next year with the funding. And the rest of it is under contractual step increases. At this point, there is no raises or anything built into it, just step increases and the change in the SAFER grant. Off of that, everything else going down the line, again, is all contractual. Longevity went up a little bit. Again, somebody hit 10 years. The holiday pay is contractual, the skill incentives. The next real big thing on there is my training. My training went down, and ultimately what it is I showed the SAFER portion of funding. So I've deducted out what SAFER grant is going to reimburse us. So that's on that page there. It's a 2.2% increase for us. If we can go to the next one. So our purchase of services, our biggest increases are under the maintenance contracts. That is our dispatch software. Again, similar to Chief Alfano's, it's a required maintenance contract to keep our software going. That's our dispatch software. And then if you go down on the contracted services, our biggest increase there is a new requirement for us is we have to pay a medical director to oversee our ambulance. We've never had to do that before. This is the first year we've had to do it. And that is to have a doctor overseeing everything we do in the ambulance. So if we are on a call and we need to make contact with the doctor, we're able to call Framingham Metro West Medical Center and speak directly to a doctor. So he's our medical director ultimately. And that's pretty much it for my changes. Again, I work more on a level funded basis. My biggest request would be, if there was opportunity, is looking at the deputy for the department.
Great. Thanks, Chief. And questions from the committee? Oh, go ahead, John.
Thanks. Chief, I know the last few years there's been discussion about, I think it's a Medicaid payment, the revenue that we get from the ambulance usage. And just, could you say a little bit about that, how that's changed in the past fiscal year? Sorry if it was on one of the slides and I missed it.
Yep. So late in 19, I think it was November of 19, we actually increased our ambulance billing rates.
Yeah.
With that said, when you transport a Medicaid, Medicare, you don't get the full value. The state automatically cuts it down to I think it's $506 right now per. Even though our bill may say it's up to a $2,000 bill, it won't get paid. So it's definitely, the revenue really comes from private insurance. This past year, we did have a loss because we didn't transport about 150 of those people. So there was definitely a decrease. It is expected to jump back up next year, providing COVID does straighten out. So our revenue this year was about $606,000.
Thank you. And it's certainly understandable, and we're very sensitive to the fact that given what's happened this year, a lot of these numbers are going to be different from the year before, and probably different, hopefully, in the year after.
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully, if you looked at the 150 runs we were short and billing,
yeah,
even if you took them at the lower value of $500 a call, that's a substantial amount of money.
Right. Understood. And certainly, obviously it goes without saying, but, as a finance committee here, for any of the public watching, we're not interested in there being, more calls so that the town generates revenue, but it is certainly an issue for us because it's a cost to the town potentially when people do need these services. So just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Yeah, and maybe just follow on a little bit on that, and this might be more in Brittany's realm, but maybe kind of remind us where those ambulance fees go and how they're used to fund the operating budget of the fire department. Because do they sit in revolving funds, Brittany, and then we kind of fund certain operating costs with those monies?
Yes, so there was a special revenue fund created a few years ago for the EMS ambulance runs, and about 425,000 of the revenue generated offsets the firefighters' salaries. So last year we took in, like Keith said, $600,000 in revenue. So
Okay.
we're going to do the same thing year to year.
So despite lower volume, we still have enough in there to cover the
Mhm.
operating budget that was previously covered by these monies.
Yeah, and even though we took in less calls, we still generated the same amount of revenue because we increased our rates.
Okay.
So looking at next year and the year after, I would expect us to be in like the 700, 750 range for revenue. It's tough because we changed the rates halfway through the year and then COVID hit.
Gotcha.
So we haven't really had a year to really analyze what we really could take in with the increased rates.
Okay,
Just
thank
to
you.
clarify, it'd be 625 we're looking at taking out of with this budget.
Right, with the public safety building.
Say that, what do you mean with the public safety building?
So 425 is utilized for salaries, and then an additional 200 is being utilized to help pay for the public safety building.
Okay, basically the non-debt funded portion.
Right. That was part of that 750 of the non-excluded. That was part of the assistance to pay that.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Appreciate that. Other committee members, any questions?
I do have a question on the next slide. It's a fairly mundane and low budget item, but in my line of, yes, thank you. My line of work,
Yep.
we're also obligated to pay software contract fees. So I'm sensitive to being beholden to software companies for things like a 17% increase. So just curious if you anticipate that year over year, if that's a 3-year contract or what's, are there any strategies that could be employed to sort of mitigate big increases, community purchasing, not community, but surrounding community purchases or longer license agreements, things like that. I know it's extra administrative work, so sometimes it's not worth it. So just curious your thoughts there.
So ultimately, that is not just software that went up. There's other contracted stuff listed on the budget that went up a little bit too.
Okay. All right. Thanks for clarifying.
I think it's a planned 0.06 increase a year, I think is what the contract says.
Okay. All right. My apologies. I misread the
No, that's
lines.
fine. That was the majority of it, though.
Could you just go back on the SAFER grant? So it's currently 7525, correct? And it's in March that it changes to
of 20.
3565?
It goes 3565 for the third year
For the third year. And that starts in March, so sort of midway.
of fiscal year 22.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And when do we bear the full cost of that? So eventually it's going to be 100% town funded, right?
It'll be FY 2024.
Okay. Any other committee members have questions? Okay. Well, thanks, Chief Roby. We appreciate it as always. You're walking us through your budget. So I think next up we have Doug there. Who's on mute?
I'm going to try to share my screen, but Look, I just made you co-host, so you should be able to do it now.
Nice. Thanks, Jen.
You're welcome.
Okay, I mean, it's obviously a tough act to follow between these behind these two guys. This is not nearly as exciting. My presentation is not nearly as exciting as the two chiefs. So what this is basically, first of all, thank you for having me. So I'm just going over the general fund accounts that are housed over here at the DPW. And so if you see here, we have 6 general fund accounts. The first one is the Public Works admin.
We can't see your screen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Doug.
No.
Sorry.
Well, the bottom line is I'm looking for a 0.7% increase from last year. It's really there are no changes.
We want to be with you, Doug.
You can email me, Doug, if you want, and I can share it.
All right. Hang on. All right, here we go, Britt.
That's all right, Doug. You don't have to learn how to share these things as long as you keep the roads plowed, right?
You're right. The share button. Let's see. DPW General. There we go. Okay, Britt. Hopefully it's on its way.
Even a turtle can learn this. Doug, even a turtle can learn this.
Sorry, Mark. We need the elevator music. Cue the elevator music. Yep.
All right.
Okay, take 2. So 6 general fund budgets for the DPW. Basically, we have Public Works admin, highway, cemetery, parks and trees, snow and ice, street lighting, combined fuel account. And if you look over to the right-hand side, overall, we're looking for a 0.7% increase compared to FY21. Personnel. I just have a comparison here of FY19 through FY22's proposed. So for next year, we're looking at 11.01 full-time positions. And for this year, we're at 11.01, no changes. So scrolling down a little bit, Britt, we have Public Works admin. That just gets into the details. There are no changes there at all. On the highway budget, a little further down, the only change we have is a $4,400 increase in the permanent positions due to union salaries, contracted union salaries anyways. So there's only $4,400 increase there. So down to the next one, Britt. Cemetery, parks and trees, that one FY22 proposal is the same as FY21. There's no changes. And then the next one is snow and ice. So this is more like a living and breathing type of budget. If you look where it says overall expenditures, I have FY13 listed through FY20. And so the average over those, I think, 8 years was $571,000. And so far to date, for this year, we're at $362,000. And a little over to the right there, we have the salt purchased. So the average over the last 4 years was approximately 3,600 or 3,000 tons, I think. And so far this year, we've purchased 1,900 tons. So at the rate we're going, normally we average about 6 plowable snowstorms a year. With the contractors, I think tonight will be our fifth one so far to date. So scrolling down a bit, Britt. Street lighting. So I requested an extra $5,000 on this one because this year we got a few calls for repairs to street lights. So we're running into more and more electrician costs and with the street lights. But it's pretty much yeah. So I think we had a $40,000 budget. We're looking for $45,000, and that's in good shape. And then the next one is the combined fuel for the diesel and the gas. This one we're in pretty good shape as well. I requested, I think, an extra $500, and that's due to miscellaneous supplies. What happens? The gas pumps go down, and we have to bring in a vendor to repair the gas pumps. Quite frankly, $1,500 for that is a low number, but we make it work. And so overall, we're looking at I'm proposing a 0.7% increase compared to this year, and that's all I have.
Hey, Doug, every year, thank you very much. We know there's always the potential for some potentially very costly equipment changes or upgrades or the unexpected repairs. Could you just say a little bit about any of that you see in the foreseeable future, just that we need to be aware of?
Yeah, so over the last 10, 15 years or so, the town has been doing a really good job as far as purchasing equipment every year or every other year, one or two pieces every year, as opposed to when Petron first got here, we had to buy a whole bunch in 1 year. But we're doing pretty good as far as equipment goes. One of the big ticket items, of course, are the sanders, and we ordered a sander in this current fiscal year. They take about a year to get after you order them. So we have a new one that we're expecting. We'll probably get it sometime around June or July, and then we'll be trading in one of the older ones for it. And then next year we do not have one program for next year, but the year after, hopefully we'll be able to. And I could be wrong. Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, but so we've been doing pretty good with these big sanders and with the smaller trucks and with the loaders and the backhoes. As far as, there's always something. The guys would love to get a Bobcat. I know Vinny, the chief, loves Bobcats too, and he wants to drive the sidewalk machine tonight. So we got to keep the chief happy. But overall, yeah, like I said, as long as we continue to, pick up one or two trucks a year, because we still have plenty of trucks that are 15 to 20 years old. So we're just doing the best we can to rotate them out. And this year, with the COVID, it was we got lucky with being able to put one guy per truck during this time. And even if it was piecing together a couple of these trucks that were on their last legs, so we were very fortunate. But we did not have any extra trucks whatsoever this year. So, but we're in good shape as long as we continue the program of replacing trucks continuously and all that. And the loaders, like I said, we have two good loaders, and we have 3 sidewalk machines. 2 of them have snow blowers, and one of them is the V plow, the Bombardier, which we're in good shape with. It would be good, within the next 5 years to replace one of them, or just to continue that, because it's critical to have the schools open, to get the sidewalks done for the schools. How things change later in life with this remote, the kids being able to have a snow day from home, to be determined, I guess. But so that's about it on the equipment.
Thank you.
Let's see. Go ahead, Ryan. Can't hear you, bud. You're. Yep. Ryan, flip your thing down.
Oh, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, everyone. Thanks, Doug. A quick question for you. If we could scroll back up to the utilities for under street lighting, and can you remind us when the LED lighting went in, and if there was any offset in utilities expenses after that? And this might be a question for Brittany and Michael as well. But I thought we were offsetting some of these expenditures with solar revenue. So maybe I've got that a little bit not straight, but just curious. So we've kind of level funded this for a few years in a row.
I can. So the offset, Ryan, would be in the facilities budget. That's where we receive the solar credits. But it didn't affect the street lighting budget.
Okay.
That I remember.
Okay.
Ryan, we did the street lights as part of the energy performance contract, I think in 2015.
Yeah.
And we did that through the Green Communities Grant. And previously, the LED or the street lighting budget was around $90,000.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. So it's just been a while. So that's great. And the funny thing is, I don't know if Mark's still on the call, but I remember him saying, man, these LED streetlights are much brighter. So, all right. It's just been a while. Okay. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I forgot, Ryan.
Any other questions from the committee for Doug?
Yeah, I have one.
Okay.
And I think we've asked this in prior years, and there's an explanation, so might just be a repeat. The budget for snow and ice, why is that not what you calculate as the average?
Brittany, you want it? You want to take that?
Yeah, I'll take it. So if we budget snow and ice at say 500,000, every year subsequent to that, we would have to budget at 500,000 or more. And theoretically, if we really wanted to, we could raise the deficit on the recap every year. So we have options to fund snow and ice, not just with current year funding.
Okay. Yep. Nope. That rings a bell. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
As I say, I could probably answer that at this point.
I know. Once you started, I was like, yep, I knew that.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions for Doug? I can tell you, Doug,
it wouldn't be budget review if we didn't ask that question.
I know. You guys out here working hard, plowing my cul-de-sac right now.
Good.
Anyway, well, thank you, Doug. Appreciate your time. Thanks for meeting with us, as always. So I think next on the agenda would be you, Brittany.
So looking at the general fund budget, so Michael went into it a little bit. So the general government budget is at $12,077,000. So that's a 0.76% increase. We are allowed to go up to 2.5%, but since we are suggesting the reduced general stabilization reliance to 900,000, it does create a deficit at the bottom line. And the deficit would be 693,288. So I have a current deficit of 193. So if you include the general stabilization reduction of 500,000, the total deficit is 693, which we are proposing to then split 70-30 with the school. The town would absorb about 200,000, and the school would absorb 485,000.
So maybe you pause there for a second. I'm just maybe a little confused. Yep. So the first bullet there, deficit of 193.
Yep.
How does that reconcile to the 200 being absorbed by town and 485 by schools?
So the 193 is just the deficit that I had in doing the budget itself. So no matter what, we would have to split that 193 deficit.
Okay.
So taking the 1.4 million and then reducing it this year to 900,000, that's a $500,000
Gotcha.
difference that we have to make up. So it comes to 693, then we split 70-30.
So the deficit was if we were using 1.4.
There'd be probably no deficit at 1.4.
Okay.
But since we're moving down to 900,000, it creates a small deficit instead of there being a very large deficit at the end of 3 years.
Gotcha. Okay.
Is the school budget, how close to final is the school requested budget?
I honestly don't know. I believe they had a budget workshop yesterday, but I'm not sure really where they are in their budget process.
And a 2.36% increase sounds small compared to past years. Is that a fair statement, or is that about what they routinely request?
Usually what they're allowed to go up is 3.75. I think it appeared larger in prior years because our state aid came in so much higher in prior years. Do you remember the year that it came in $1 million more because they changed the formula? And we just had surpluses, so it pushed that percent increase up to more probably the 4 to 5 to 6% range. So I would say this is standard. It's lower than what they would request is a 3.75%, but it's obviously not as high as what we can give them in prior years.
Okay, so I guess I'm not. That's sort of a straight answer. It sounds like though we don't have a number from the schools yet that's firm.
We don't.
No,
Right.
we don't.
I
No.
think they're actually in just the nascent stages of their budget discussions, which is kind of in line with where they usually are.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't a challenge. These numbers look firm, but they're probably looser. And the reason I'm reacting that way is it's kind of if this were to go as it were, it's a 50+% cut to their increase that we'd be asking them to take in terms of the deficit, absorbing the deficit. Not for nothing. And I started the meeting by applauding you for reducing the reliance on the stabilization fund. But we have a stabilization fund, and it's actually level, right? So that messaging just coming full circle that the stabilization fund was kind of net neutral last year, if we can use that terminology. We didn't actually take the $1.4 million. So if we do think we need it, appreciating future fiscal cliffs, I'm not sure why we wouldn't consider using it if it really is needed this year, because things like the CARES Act were helpful in the current year, but may or may not be there next year.
Ryan, I think the point is well taken. But the thing is we've built expenditures, and I mean, it's not just the schools. I mean, the general government department has made, we usually get like a 2.5% increase by formula, and it's usually a lot more. I mean, we're all kind of trying to do this.
Sorry, I wasn't. I was just using the schools as an example, but obviously the town's deficit of 207 plus the 193, right? So there isn't 600. There's more than $600,000 there, but it's close, to get you back to 1.4. So I guess maybe thinking about it differently, you had put forward a plan to pull 1.4 million and 1.4 million in 2 consecutive years from the stabilization fund. If that timeline shifted out by a year, reset today, and it's $1.4 million in 22 and 923 and 424. Well, have we thought through the consequences of that, assuming some shape, one of those alphabet shaped recovery scenarios is going to happen? We have tools at our hands that could be used if the need's great.
I do think, obviously we could look at pushing it out if we wanted to. The problem is that we've built a budget on a on $1.4 million. And so at some point it doesn't matter whether we replenish it or not.
Yeah.
It is a budget that has expenditures that are predicated on taking one-time revenue out.
Got it. I got it. Okay. I understand. Yeah. It's not as simple checking account where you pull the money out and put it back in. I understand.
Exactly. But your point is well taken. And I think that's why it's like, oh, even though we have level state aid, why aren't we going from $1.4 million to nothing? Right. We're kind of what we're trying to do is slowly reduce the reliance on the stabilization fund so we can gradually, and hopefully as revenues catch up, they'll kind of meet in the middle. I guess that's probably the best thing to say without having to make draconian cuts or do like an operating override.
Your soft landing, as you called it.
Yeah. And this isn't the line item budget review, but I would be interested to see, we accounted, I believe, for $500,000 out of the operating budget to support public safety building. Was capital, I believe, is where the funds were being pulled from. So I think that was a decision made in the interest of the taxpayers and probably underappreciated. So it's worth pointing out now. I think we had asked at one point when we were discussing that, would there be any negative repercussions to the operating budget? So I do want to be mindful that we had a conversation about that, and we do consider that because at the time we said no, we think we can accommodate it. Now you can't predict the future, and we are here looking at a potential deficit. Certainly that might not be there if we had $500,000 per annum for that we pulled out of what was a capital fund. So it's just food for thought and conversation. We did make a conscious decision to fund some of the public safety building with operating budget funds.
That is true.
All right, Brittany.
Okay. So this is just a high level overview of the budget. Michael went through some of them, and I'll go into them in a little bit more depth later. You can see the general government is projected to go up just 91,000.76%. And the big items, Keith Tech, 30%, non-excluded debt, 9%, excluded debt is going down, and then benefits and insurance are going up. So this is what you were asking about earlier, Ryan, were the CARES funding. So we received I believe it's a little bit less than 1.6 million. This is what we spent the CARES funding on and what I am projecting the cost to be spent on through June 30th. After June 30th, the CARES funding will be completely expended. So this is the town share of what we have spent the money on. And you can see a good portion of it was unemployment, first responder costs, the staff for compliance and reporting, and so forth. So what we've done is incorporate any of the recurring expenses that we think we might have into the operating budget. So some of those costs would be just a buffer in information technology for any remote needs of staff, some funding in the health department for test kits or maybe additional staffing if they need it. Overtime for police and fire in case they have to backfill any of their employees that need to quarantine or they test positive. Public buildings, we have money in there for additional cleaning or social distancing or something that we just can't think of right now. Unfortunately, we have to keep the unemployment budgeted high. We don't know if unemployment will be extended, for how long, if people can find jobs. So there's a lot of unknowns with employment. And then purchasing, just for postage, we're mailing out a lot more mailings.
Thanks for putting that together.
You're welcome.
That's a really helpful overview.
So I was just going to go at like a high level through departments that had any, I guess, major changes. But I can say the other departments really just didn't have anything going on in them. So starting with the town manager, to save some money, we shifted the communication and events coordinator position. Half of her salary was charged here. So we shifted that onto the economic development special revenue fund. So that was 24,000 of it. Reduce some of the line items in the department as well, for a savings of 85,000. Increase central purchasing. Telecommunications really is being level funded. We actually did spend that much last year, so it's really being level funded. It's just showing an increase this year. Try to do a better job managing the council services budget. Data processing. We do have money in there in the equipment line item for COVID related. If any employees need anything to work from home. We also increased the contracted services a little bit for the increase in vendors in that department. The elections budget went down due to just less activity this year. My budget is going up due to the audit, and the OPEB study is this year as well in FY22. The health department, the overall budget is going down, but if you remember last year, we put in 50,000 into that budget from adjustments that we had made with state aid and reduced assessments. So we're still retaining 25,000 of it, of that 50,000 that we put in there. The veteran services budget, that's per a vote of the district. In the public buildings, we had also put in at the special town meeting 200,000. So we're retaining 80,000 of it for the facilities director and also for COVID related items and the unknown. Now, Keith Tech, that's going up significantly this year. So from a discussion with John a few weeks ago, we're going up 10 students net. But there were 12 graduates in FY20 and 22 freshmen in FY21. So the net impact is 10 students. So I think John's presentation will be interesting when he's able to have a final presentation to give us. Debt service Michael went over, so it's going up for the previously authorized projects and also setting aside some funding for future borrowing capital needs of the town per our 5-year plan. And benefits and insurance, the GIC is expected to go up between 4 and 7%. So I have budgeted a modest 5.5% with a contingency there. The retirement assessment comes directly from the Middlesex retirement system. And fortunately, that's an 11% increase this year. They had a study done, and this is the assessment that was given to us, unfortunately. So that's a huge jump from last year, 353,000. And unemployment, I'm just showing you the trend that we've had over the last, 7 or 8 years or so. We've gone down significantly, and this pandemic really has spiked unemployment claims back up. We are receiving credits. There's been a lot of fraudulent claims that have come in. So with that being cleared up and it's slowing down, we're still averaging about 8,500 a month in unemployment claims. So that's all I have.
Hey, Brittany, can you go back to the overall where you had the excluded, non-excluded debt? I think it was the first few slides.
This one or?
No, I think it was maybe slide. Yeah, the highlights.
Yep.
So just to kind of level set kind of where we're going. The excluded debt is what we voted on, right, for schools and public safety. That's obviously we're not gonna see much if any of that in 22, but that's where we will see it eventually.
You would see it if we borrow this year, you would see it next year at this time. So you'll see it on your 3rd and 4th quarter bill.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, primarily for the benefit of the folks listening at home, if there are any, but that excluded debt service line, it's kind of going down like we've expected, right? With certain projects reaching their maturity, right? The town hall, I think was part of that, the senior center, library, maybe, I forget. But that's kind of going down like we expected. And then that is going to ramp back up in future years with, first the public safety building, then eventually Mendez, right?
Right.
So is it FY? So that's the FY22 budget. FY23 budget is where we're really going to start seeing that. Is that correct?
It would be FY23, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any questions for Brittany from the committee? I know this is all preliminary and this is all very helpful. Obviously this will be fine tuned as we move throughout the budget season and talk about it in our future meetings. Once schools nails theirs down, Keep Tech nails theirs down, so on and so forth. So. I'm looking at Ryan because I'm expecting something, but maybe not.
I think I got all my questions in already, Scott.
Okay. Well, don't have to force the issue, but thanks, Brittany. Appreciate that overview. We look forward to meeting in the coming weeks and months just to kind of see kind of where we land, and I think we'll probably be having some conversations along the lines of using the stabilization fund, whether we need it, so on and so forth. But so I think that's it as far as budgets. Is that right, Michael?
That's it.
Yeah. So, okay. For the folks that are here to present their budgets, again, thank you. We appreciate your time. Much rather would have seen you in person in the select board room, but maybe next year after we all get our shots, right?
Right.
So I think as far as the rest of the agenda, the committee members, you should have received some outstanding minutes from Jen yesterday via email, and we got 5 of them to go through and or discuss if we have any questions. But thank you, Jen, for getting these, prioritizing and getting these done. Be good to catch up on some of these older ones. And I will say we were waiting on select board and school committee for the tri-board, so we won't take that entire blame. So anyway, with that, go ahead, Jen. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say that that would bring us up to date on all the minutes except the first tri-board meeting in March. But I'm in discussion with others. I have notes scribbled in a notebook. It was the first Zoom meeting, remember last March? So I was handwriting instead of figuring out how to type and be on a Zoom at the same time.
Hi, Doug.
With these, if we approve them all, we'll get them posted and we will be up to date, but for that one that's missing for all the boards at this point.
Okay. So with that, I guess we'll take them one by one, starting with the May 18th tri-board meeting. Again, all these were distributed. Committee members, if you've had time to read those beforehand. Questions, thoughts, comments from the committee? All right, then I guess I'll make the motion that we vote to approve the May 18th, 2020 tri-board meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by, I heard John and Ryan. We'll call John, I guess. And we'll do a roll call vote since we're here online. I'll start in my top row, which is Jen.
Yes.
Jack.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Ryan.
Yes.
Ashwini.
Yes.
And Scott, yes. So we've adopted those minutes unanimously. The next set of minutes is the got a work call coming now. Good. It's that thing. Next one is August 18th, 2020 tri-board meeting. Again, those are distributed earlier to the committee members. Questions, comments, edits on those? Okay, I guess I'll make a motion on that one again, that we vote to approve the August 18th, 2020 tri-board meeting minutes. And do I have a second?
Second.
John, second. and I'll do a roll call. Jen,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Ashwini.
Yes, I just wanted to let Jen know that I was at this meeting and my name is not here in the FinCom role.
Okay. All right, I will figure out how to manage that. I'll need to get a Word version, I guess, from the school committee. Because I think they've approved it sort of as is. So I'll figure out how to do that, but I'll.
If it's not too much of a thing, if it doesn't matter, don't worry about it.
I'll figure out the best way to handle it. So it's voted, I guess, approved with that change.
Because I do know that I was not able to attend a couple meetings, and one of them was the previous one that we voted on. And I did remember I didn't make it to that one, but this one I was there.
That August one. Okay.
Okay. Maybe I'll kind of, I don't know, do we have to redo a motion there? I'm not up to date with parliamentary procedure.
I think you do need to redo the motion for the minutes to be modified per the.
Okay. All right. So I'll make a motion that we approve the August 18, 2020 tri-board meeting minutes with the addition of Ashwini to the attendees. Do I have a second?
Second.
Ryan seconded. Take a roll call again. Jen?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Ashwini?
Yes, thank you.
And Scott is a yes. Okay, thank you. All right, moving along into November 10th, 2020 FinCom meeting. Again, those minutes were distributed earlier. Any thoughts, comments, edits from the committee before we move to on a motion on that? Okay. So I'll make a motion again that we approve the November 10th, 2020 FinCom meeting minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by John, and roll call. Jen?
Yes.
Yeah. Jack?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Ashwini?
Yes.
And Scott is a yes. Okay. Moving along. November 24th, 2020 FinCom meeting minutes. Again, distributed earlier. Any questions, comments from the committee?
I did get one comment on this. The last, wait a minute. I need to adjust the vote number, I think. Sorry, hold on.
Do you want to share your screen, Jen? Or
Yeah, you dropped to a total of 6 at Article 11.
Yeah, so Article the adjournment.
The adjournment.
6-0.
So say again, what was edited, the adjournment vote?
So the adjournment vote, there was 6 of us at that time.
Oh, because did someone leave?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
And I'm just going to tweak the attendee part here to just how I'm writing the 7th, when someone started or left. Again, it's written in the minute, it's detail in the weeds here, but it was looking funky with the votes going 6-0, then up to 7-0, then back down to 6-0. So I tried to just clarify in the beginning. I'm just going to change a little bit how I wrote that.
Jen, will that be in the members present section or in a
so in the members
section?
I mean, unless you all have a strong preference, I was going to, so in the members present, Ryan, it would say, arrive or ARR 735. And then for Ashwini, I was just going to put, DEP 845.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Where I entered the meeting for discussion of Article 11, you have a note, and where Ashwini leaves, sorry, Article 6, and where Ashwini leaves, you have her leaving as noted there. So I think that's fine. It's just It's there. I think it is there in detail. I would suggest you could just correct the last vote of the adjourn. But if you want to make others, that's fine.
Do you think it can come out of the members present part?
I think it could. It is, you do have it noted
Right.
where I came and Ashwini left.
Yeah, I think as long as someone can crosswalk who came and went.
Okay, perfect. And that's how I think we've done it in the past, but. Okay, so I'm taking it out of the members present and I am changing the adjourned vote to 6-0. Important stuff here.
Yeah. Okay, I think I'll make a motion that we approve the November 24th, 2020 meeting minutes with those edits. The adjournment going to 6-0. And what was it, Jen? Removing
The arrive and depart times just from the members present in the beginning, but
Gotcha.
keeping it in the text for the articles.
Gotcha. Okay. There a second?
I'll second.
All right, Jen, second. Do a roll call. Jen,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Ashwini,
Yep.
and Scott is a yes. And last, but certainly not least, the January 12th, 2021 Finance Committee meeting minutes. Again, those are distributed prior to today's meeting for review. Any questions, comments, edits from the committee? Or Jen, any that you received in advance? Nope. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the January 12th, 2021 meeting minutes. For a second?
Second.
Second by John. Roll call. Jen,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
John,
Aye.
Ryan,
Yes.
Ashwini,
Yeah.
and Scott is a yes. So
And Jen, just a note, I mean, you distributed to us, you're really, so thank you, first of all, for taking such nice notes. They're very easy to follow. We didn't receive the attachments, but those were all circulated at prior meetings. So just a note, I presume that when they go in, they'll have the attachments for public consumption.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Do you want me to circulate the attachments to the committee? I didn't think we had done that previously since we sort of all had them.
I don't think so. I mean, it's
Yeah, it's fine. I'm just noting it.
Speak for themselves, but I don't think I need them.
Yeah, they're available through pre-circulation or prior circulation. So
Yep.
I was just making a note there.
And maybe Jen, are you still on? Jen Ball?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, just I guess I should have mentioned this before, but as a reminder, we'll need those copies of those presentations that were presented.